Welcome back to the Jess Berry Podcast. Today we're talking about identity collapse, addiction, transition, and unconventional healing with Richard Mulder. Rich is a former Army captain, West Point graduate, and combat veteran of Afghanistan, turned author and entrepreneur. After a successful military and civilian career, he faced a profound identity crisis following his transition out of the military, battling alcoholism and passive suicidality. His healing journey led him to Peru, where plant medicine became a turning point in reclaiming his life and purpose. Today, Rich is the founder of Apricus Coaching Initiative, where he coaches individuals, including preparation and integration support for the IA mission, and provides consulting and ghostwriting for businesses and leaders. Welcome, Rich.
Cool. Thanks, Jess. Appreciate it. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like you have a lot of really good leadership experience, especially with the military. I want to dive into that and just hear your thoughts and what are some things that you learned about leadership from your time in service?
Yeah, gosh, I always say that if my time active would have been like my time at West Point, then I would have stayed in for a career if they would have had me.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting, because every time someone asks me a question about this, it's like something else kind of comes up, like something fleeting. But at the end of the day, like I really think that leadership is about love, and like there's no substitute for it. And so that's the biggest thing that I carried with me then. It's the biggest thing I carry with me now. Leadership is about love. And if you love the people that you're working with, that you're serving, then you will be a good leader, and part of that, is leading from the front and leading by example. I think that you don't have to be Superman. You don't have to be, the very best at everything in the room at all. Like that's not what leading in the front or leading from the front is, but you do have to be able to put yourself in front of the problem and be the first one in the door. And I think that if you are willing to do that with love for the people that you are leading, then you can be an effective and good leader.
Mm-hmm. I love that. It sounds like you had a lot of that, like loving leadership at West Point. Tell us a little bit more about like what led you to West Point, and also describe a little bit about what that is for somebody who might not know.
Yeah. So I didn't know. I was in high school when 9/11 happened, and I was immediately like, oh, okay, well, send me. I'm going. Like, what's my quickest route to serve in the military? And my parents were the ones that kind of slowed me down, and they were like, whoa, like let's just like explore all your options and hang on a second. And my family hasn't been in the military before. I was the first one, and they told me about the military academies, and that was the first I had ever heard of it. I ended up getting accepted into a summer program at West Point, and I went up there and I just like totally fell in love with the campus, first of all. And like being there, it's just hallowed ground. I mean, it's unbelievable. Like there were literally, battles that were fought in the immediately surrounding area in the American Revolution. There's this amazing part. It's right on the Hudson River. And so they still have the chains that they floated across the Hudson River to stop the British Navy from being able to travel down the river. And wow. I mean, it's just like rich with history there. And so like that was an aspect of it. Everyone that I encountered there was nice and smart and funny and in great shape and just carried themselves so incredibly. And I just fell in love. I totally fell in love. And I was like, oh, I have to go here. I didn't even apply to the other service academies. I was just like, this is where I have to go. I felt very called to it. And then I barely got in, like by the skin of my teeth. You have to go and you get like a senator's recommendation or your congressman's recommendation, and you have to get past, jump through all these hoops to even get considered for an appointment there. And I had done all that, but I was still number 2 in my district. And so I kind of found out at the 11th hour, I think it was in May, that I found out that he had dropped out and decided he didn't want to go anymore. So I got bumped up and I got the appointment, and I reported in June. And it was just this blur from that point on for 9 years.
Yeah. Wow. And so you went straight from West Point into enlisting? Is that right?
Officer. So it's like, so it is a little bit different.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So you go from being, a cadet, and then you go to, I branched infantry. And so I went to Fort Benning, Georgia for like a year, and I did the airborne school and ranger school and striker leader and all this other kind of stuff there before I went to my unit. But then I got to my unit, and, I'm like, I think I was 22. and I was a second lieutenant, and it's not what they tell you it's going to be. And I'm like just full of all this like youthful piss and vinegar and ready to go, kick down doors and lead men in battle and blah blah blah, all this stuff. And my first assignment was I basically had to handhold a staff sergeant who had come home early from Iraq because he was having very significant problems with his family and his wife. And I was so young, and the guy that I'm trying to help through this process is older than I am. He's done way more in his life than I have at that point. And it was my first kind of, I guess, just exposure to how young I was and how inexperienced I was and what was being asked of me, because it didn't stop there. There's so many things that you deal with as a second lieutenant or a lieutenant, really, in general, just as a young officer in the military. You are asked to do things that are well beyond like any sort of scope of practice. There's no such thing. Like everything is in your scope. If you are a leader in the military, like you have to do it all. And so like when someone in your platoon gets a DUI, that's your fault. When anything goes wrong, it's your fault. And it really is an interesting kind of pressure to put on young people. It was really interesting. I owned a gym called Liberty Performance Training in Phoenix for a long time. We worked with these cadets there from ASU. They were part of the Ranger Challenge is what it was. And I was really torn because I saw these kids, and, we'll probably get into, the effects and just kind of some of the things that I went through afterwards. But I saw these kids, and they were all just awesome, and they were so just smart and funny and in good shape, and they had this like black humor kind of that is kind of necessary to get through really difficult things. It like helps keep heavy things light, and they just had all of the qualities. And I'm looking at them and I'm like, man, like this is America's best and brightest. This is the best that we have to offer, and we're sending them to war, and it really is so sad. But if someone would have like tried to tell me that when I was 18, 21, I would have been like, okay, like I know better than you.
Right.
And so you just got to kind of like toe that line and just do the best you can and just make sure they're as prepared as possible for their own decisions.
Right. Sounds like you had the opportunity right off the bat, caring for that soldier who had returned from Iraq to like employer loving leadership. Like even though you didn't have all that life experience, like you could still love him, I think that's really important.
That's actually a good point. I never actually really even considered it from in that particular instance, but yeah, you're right. I think that's like kind of what I always just fell back on is like, oh, I want to help this guy. And so that was enough.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to get into a little bit of the Afghanistan deployment. What's something that you wish more people knew about overseas deployment?
Oh gosh, man. There is just no leveling with it if you haven't done it. I've talked about this with a few people. I remember I was talking with my friend Tommy Santanato about this, and we were just like, when you've experienced combat like that, with bullets flying and things happening and explosions and all this stuff, like you have experienced the pinnacle of what the human nervous system can respond to, basically. And so you've experienced like the pinnacle of what your nervous system can respond to, and that makes a huge mark on your body and on your mind for a long time. And most people are not even aware of that. You could be in a firefight one day and be out the next day and find IEDs, and then you could be out the next day and you could see someone get killed, or like all of these things. The toll that takes on you is not readily apparent. A lot of times it's never unpacked after the fact. And so we sit with this stress that has occurred on our nervous system, and it starts to show up in the form of hypervigilance or insomnia or sleep deprivation or moral injury of some other kind, maybe survivor's guilt or whatever this is. It shows up later and we can't recognize it for what it is. And that's just a nervous system response. It's not so much about that. It's about the cumulative effect that your childhood has on your indoctrination into the military, on these your handling of these traumatic effects of combat, and then afterwards trying to reconcile all of that mentally is near impossible, And so a lot of people go crazy because they think they have to reconcile it mentally, when really it's much more helpful to reconcile it physically by feeling and getting back in touch with yourself and remembering who you are.
Yeah, I love how you phrase that really well. There's so much that gets stored in the body after going through traumatic experiences, and um, I love how you phrase like the being in combat is a scenario where your nervous system is like experiencing the peak of like what it can really handle, and that that made me think. I know there's like everybody goes through hard things, right? And various levels of trauma, but it's all difficult to that individual. And so I think no matter like what you've been through, there could be people listening like, wow, I've never been through anything close to that. But it's about recognizing, like you said, it's less about the actual experience and more about how it's affecting you and your nervous system, and how you can learn to like leave that in the past and fully embrace who you actually are, like setting that pain aside, stop identifying with it, and learn how to like feel your emotions, sit with yourself, and move forward. So yeah, for anybody listening, just like a reminder that everybody goes through hard things, and comparing your hardship or adversity or trauma to somebody else's is just like missing the point. Like you don't need to do that. What's going to help you more is really acknowledging where you're at and how that's affecting you in your day-to-day life, and then moving forward. What are some things that helped you, Rich, in your journey, like recognizing the ways that those adverse experiences were affecting you after the fact?
It's interesting you mentioned like trauma comparison, because that's definitely something that I did along this kind of like, healing journey, if you want to call it that. But so I think like I might as well like frame this properly like that. So at the gym, we had this group called Merging Vets and Players, who it was for combat vets and current and former professional athletes. And they would come in every Wednesday night, and we would do a workout, just something super simple. And then we would have the huddle. And in the huddle, I just saw these hardened men and women who had been through so much, just totally opening up about everything in their lives, about struggles with addiction, and about struggles in their relationships and trauma that they had been through as children, in the military, outside of it, just being very open and having this container to put it in. And it was the very first time that I was kind of like, whoa, I can examine my stuff, and I can do it without judgment. And I don't need to be afraid of what people are going to think or say. And so that was really huge for me. And then I got in touch. One of my buddies put me in touch with this group called Heroic Hearts Project. And Heroic Hearts Project is an incredible organization that sent me down to Peru with another group of vets for ayahuasca ceremonies. And that was my first time with ayahuasca. But I went into my initial counseling session it was kind of like an intake session for Heroic Hearts. And the guy that was interviewing me, he was a combat vet too. And he's like, oh, tell me about your combat experience. And so I tell him about it. And I'm like, you know what, but I had some anxiety attacks when I first got home, but I don't have them anymore. I don't have nightmares. I think it sits pretty well with me. That being said, I struggle with alcohol. I really struggle with impulsive behavior and decision making and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, it's not exactly normal to volunteer for a job that requires you to kill people and get shot at. So for most of us, our trauma happened from before we were in the military. And I had never considered it. And I had even gone into that session or that meeting with completely comparing my trauma, being like, oh, this isn't for me. This is for guys that were picking up their buddies' body parts out of buildings and all this stuff. And he normalized it in such a positive way for me, because, and now I understand so much more about it. Your trauma is not just bad things that happen to you. It's also just conditioning, really. It's anything that happened to you that's conditioned your nervous system to respond a certain way. And when you understand that, it helps take the labels away from everything. And And you don't have to label it with shame or regret or guilt. If you're feeling that, that's something you can dissect and work with and consider, but it's not necessary. And you can just understand it for what it is, and it's conditioning of your nervous system. And then the real power comes from recognizing the patterns that you can remain in or free yourself from over time. And I think I'm not sure. I feel like I'm crossing all over all kinds of timelines and stuff right now, but it's that's one of the things that I find so amazing about plant medicine and psychedelics in general is it gives us the opportunity to interrupt the default mode network for a while, and then it gives us the opportunity to just kind of like adjust our path a little bit, and we can start setting new habits. And exit patterns more quickly. It's really, really powerful thing.
What shifted for you through that ayahuasca experience in Peru that the traditional approaches weren't reaching?
Well, I had definitely tried therapy before. I had tried talk therapy. I had this outward veneer of success because I was a successful small business owner. I had friends. I was, pretty, I don't know, popular or something. I was keeping it together on the outside, and on the inside, it was like this constant ticking time bomb that was just waiting to go off. And I think, my closest friends who ever drank with me, they know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's just like, when is it going to happen? And you can talk about that all you want. And I went through little sobriety stints here and there, and I'd do 6 weeks here and I'd do whatever here. What changed though was I recognized that there was some kind of a void, some kind of a hole in me that I was dumping alcohol into. I think I knew that subconsciously because I did know that I needed to change my relationship with alcohol. I did know that. I didn't want to listen to that voice, but it was there, and I'm aware of it. And when I went to Peru, what I experienced there was God. And, which is, that means whatever you think it means, right? Like it was the most in my face affirmation that what I am doing here and what we are doing here matters. And with that one experience, I could never have another experience like that ever again. But because I had that one experience and I felt it, I was very much embodied. It wasn't just like someone handing me a book and telling me to read it and figure it out and inculcate it. I felt it. It was there. It was very real for me. And that's all I needed. I always say, like, I went into the jungle looking for answers, and I left with faith. And it's my own faith. It's faith in me. It's faith in a higher power. It's no one else's. It's mine. And I think that individual relationship with something completely outside of myself was able to fill that void that I used to put alcohol into. And so it was a tremendous experience for me in showing me what is possible, and not just fantasy dreaming, mythology, anything like that. It was, I actually saw it and felt it, and that was a incredible experience. And I do want to caveat that with, like, because not everyone listening to this will have done psychedelics or anything, certainly not intentionally like this, but there's a quote, and it's like, to the man who has been there, no explanation is required. To the man who has not been there, there is no explanation. And that's very, very true.
Yeah, I love that quote. I'm gonna just sit with that one for a little bit. You mentioned that, like, intentionality in your work now, helping with the Aya mission. How do you differentiate between somebody using plant medicine to escape versus using it for that integration and growth?
Yeah, everyone is on such an individual journey that it's so hard. And so I don't do any labeling in my work. Like, if someone is using it to avoid or escape, then you can usually tell because they're just chasing experiences. And the people that we're working with in the Aya mission are generally not those people. They're people that are, for a lot of them, it's kind of like their last line of defense. Like, I've tried all this other stuff, like nothing's working. We have a handful of people each time that have been very seriously considering suicide, and the last month prior, like leading up. There's a lot of people that are really hurting out there that have tried all these different things. And I think the way that people represent themselves sometimes in groups is very, we can't help but use our egos and strategy when we talk in groups, because that's how we interact with the external world. And so there's a lot of like fears, and there's a lot of avoidance maybe of telling the truth to a group, because it's hard enough to tell the truth to yourself, let alone come clean to a group. And so I try not to do a ton of labeling, because I think everyone is on their own individual journey. And what we focus on instead is just providing a container for people to go on that journey, go on that individual journey, and in a safe way that is a controlled environment, and it does provide the framework for an intentional journey, if that is what you are ready for. And so, and that's obviously what we encourage.
Yeah, and so part of that IA mission, if I'm not mistaken, you have the integration, like you set them up before, and then they have that support after as well.
Yeah. There's preparation, and the preparation's interesting, right? Because it's like, it's more grounded in reality. And it's kind of like, okay, this is how you treat your body leading up to it. This is how you can, begin to dial in your intentions. And I always say that, like, if you come into ceremony without intentions, it's just kind of like you're plopping down in the middle of an ocean and just letting the waves take you wherever, which is fine sometimes if that's what you want to do. But for most people in that situation, it's like, okay, if I have an intention, then I can at least point my compass in the right direction and kind of start going. And then the ocean does take you, and you have to be like, kind of surrender and work with that. Yeah. So we do the preparation ahead of time, and it's like, how do I prepare my external environment for when I return? Because that is when the most change can be affected. And so after ceremony, we have integration circles after every ceremony as well, where people it's a sharing circle, zero judgment, and just kind of the stuff that gets shared in these circles is beyond beautiful. I mean, it's people learning to love themselves for the first time in their lives, like realizing that it's okay, and so many other things. It's unbelievable. But beyond the integration circles, we do have integration calls after that. And that is where the real work kind of sets in, because there's this, we call it like the pink cloud effect. Like there's the afterglow for a couple weeks, but then you got to think about what's happening chemically inside of you as well. It's like, you've had this massive serotonin dump. And so you've got this rebound happening inside your body. And a lot of people struggle with it. I've definitely struggled with it. And it's very, very intelligent to know that that's coming, or know that that's a possibility, right? Like, be educated on the spectrum of possibilities. And so we definitely work on that too. But the integration piece is so cool, right? Because it's like, New Year's resolutions, like they don't work because it's like one time, like, I'm going to change this massive habit by getting super fired up and motivated one time. And it's not sustainable. I think all of us have like fallen off of a motivated, thing that we're going to change, at least once in our lives. And if we approach this very systematically, you can really take advantage of this neuroplastic window that we have after ceremony. Because if there's one thing that is being studied really rigorously right now about psychedelics and plant medicine, it is the increased neuroplasticity of the brain, meaning the brain's ability to change and grow and rebuild itself, basically, and build itself better, which is fascinating. I just think the brain in general is so fascinating. But so we have this neuroplastic window after ceremony where we can choose to do things a little bit differently. But like, we want to set ourselves up for success to be able to do that ahead of time. Because what we don't want, I really like the metaphor. It's like, I forget where I heard it. It's certainly not mine, but it's like we take part in these behaviors over and over and over, and we have these like deep grooves in the snow. It's like taking a sled down the same path in the snow, and you have this groove. And when you take part in a ceremony or plant medicine, you have like a fresh snowfall. And so now it's your choice. You can take the sled and you can move it over to a new path, or you can take it down the same path again. It's just going to do the same thing. And so it really is like an important opportunity to be like, okay, so like, where are we going to shift our actions in order to create a new path for ourselves that's healthier, that supports the person that we want to become?
The big thing I'm getting from that is just the intentionality behind it, and not just, and like the safe space and the structure and the container. I think that's really important for going into plant medicine.
It's
And
huge.
for, yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. I'm really excited. We're bringing someone in this May too. Something that I've never seen in a organization like this before, but we are starting to do it, which is so exciting, is support for the partners and families and friends as well, because it's also very difficult for them too, because they don't know what to expect when their loved one comes home and how to handle that themselves. And so we've introduced a new way to prepare and help them prepare and integrate as well, just for themselves. And it's not like it's not how to handle your loved one, it's how to handle yourself in these situations. And so I think that's really cool. I'm super excited about it. We just had a meeting about it, I think yesterday or the day before, and I'm stoked to add that into the curriculum.
Yeah, that's really cool to think about not only the individual, but the people who are going to be around them afterward to help support them better. That's cool. And for anybody who didn't listen to the episode with Ulysses Grant, he talks a little bit more about the IO mission and what they're doing for veterans. So definitely check that out. But thank you for sharing your experience with that, Rich. I know that there can be a big identity crisis after transitioning from the military, or maybe like from being a professional, sports player, or, after you do something for so long and then you make that transition, it's really common to have that identity crisis. Many veterans don't just lose their job, they like lose their identity or brotherhood, structure, having a mission. What part of your identity collapsed when you transitioned out of the military, and how did that show up in your mental health?
Gosh, it's such a good question. And it looks so different for everyone. So I'm definitely speaking from my personal experience. But, I say you have two identity shatterings that happen when you join the military and they say, that's not who you are anymore. This is who you are. And then when you get out and you are no longer this person that they spent, 5, 10 years, however many years building up, you are now someone else. And, all of the structure that you have in the military is gone. And, I do believe that they do their best. It's such a huge complex equation. And I do think that the military does what they can sometimes, as far as trying to help people transition. But the fact of the matter is, it's such an individual process and it's so hard. And so for me, when I got out, I was like, I'm done. Like, I'm done with the military. I never want to talk to veterans. I don't want to go to the VA. I don't want to, that's the old me. I'm done. I'm split. Like, I'm moving on. And so the problem with that is it's based on egoic structures anyways, and identities, right? And so I'm like, well, I'm just going to pick a new identity without knowing who I am at the core of me. And so it was really interesting, as I say, it's looking back at it. And, and so, I mean, I was slowly kind of just like unraveling. I was really impulsive in my relationships. I was really impulsive with my business. I was drinking just like off the charts, like so much all the time. And I didn't realize how much of an escape it was. I thought it was just like, I'm going to ride this thing till the wheels fall off. And so I couldn't even like really label it. If you would have asked me back then, like, do you want to die? I would have said, no, I don't want to die, but I don't give a shit if I live either. And so I was really just like all the time, I was just like pushing the envelope and, just putting myself in reckless situations, often. And, it was really, really, really interesting and scary, but I didn't want to admit that I was scared to look at who I was. So I think like finally being able to embrace that I am not perfect and I never can be, and that's ridiculous. And I think more so figuring out that, like, because I do have a very high performance drive, and a very high drive for excellence. And I think that's very common with people who serve anyways, but that can't exist on its own. It has to have accompanying it this space for grace for yourself. And that is really what I have been able to create for myself a lot more. I still fall into the same patterns that I have. I think that's natural, but I can exit them more quickly now. And it's just always a work in progress. And it's a work that is much better done in flow and not just sprinting as hard as I can all the time. That's no
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the survival patterns and being a high performer and the flow state as well. And I I have this outlook where, well, so I do a lot of martial arts and jujitsu. There's a big principle of tapping out, right? You're gonna tap out before somebody breaks your arm. When you sense that like pain and the danger coming, if you don't tap out, then it's going to take you out of the game for longer. But when you tap out, then you're able to reset, kind of regulate yourself, and then go back in, approach it from a different angle, and be more successful, right? And I think in order to really be in our flow state, we have to learn how to be more aware of those instances where it's time to tap out and to reset and recalibrate. And so not only like on the mat, but in daily life when we have these different habits that we've cultivated or survival patterns, like when is it time to tap out of those to regulate ourselves and then re-engage so that we can actually execute and win in life.
Yeah.
Because if you don't tap out, your nervous system is going to tap out for you, where you're going to be overachieving and then you're going to burn out, or you're just going to completely disconnect, or you might explode at somebody. Like there's so many ways that you're going to be forced to tap out unless you make that conscious choice. So I think developing that self-awareness is a huge piece in growing, not only like from past trauma, but just as an individual, like, and shifting your identity.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah.
100% accurate. When you're forcing things, like, sure, I could stay in and then I'm going to break my arm. And then, like if I don't tap, I'm going to break my arm. Like and then I'm completely set back. And it's this noticing of like when I'm forcing things, like when you're forcing things and when you're flowing. And, I like this idea of like, okay, we're like swimming in a river, right? And I'm swimming, I'm a real strong swimmer and I'm swimming as hard as I can. But if I'm not looking where I'm going and I could be swimming against the freaking current. But if I take a second, like, and just kind of like what you're talking about is like, and I gather myself, maybe I grab onto a tree for a second and I look around and I see, oh my gosh, like over in that path, like that's a better direction for me to be swimming. And then I can still swim as hard as I want, but I'm going to go so much faster and so much longer because I've assessed my situation and I'm more in a flow. And I love this idea of like laminar flow. That's like the term for like liquid flowing through like a tube or something like that, like how fast it can flow. And the idea is not to like exert more pressure on that liquid to get it to go faster. It's to make sure that there's no turbulence inside of that tube. So most of that turbulence, we introduce most of that turbulence mentally ourselves. And so it's removing that turbulence and then in order to flow instead of forcing everything. It always goes back to this, like life just happens to us, right? Like our hearts beat, our lungs breathe for us, our thoughts arise for us a lot of the times. And it's only our minds that assign control or assigned ownership after they've happened. And so if we stop forcing things and seeking out that ownership before it's real, then we allow things to happen. And that's how you get in such a better flow.
Yeah. Those are really good thoughts. I like that imagery and that idea of the tube, and like I think we put more pressure on ourselves sometimes and we think that's going to help, but it's really about like building your capacity to handle the pressure that's going on so that you can flow more effectively and efficiently through life.
Yep.
What do you think men in high structure roles, or anybody, men or women in high structure roles, are not prepared for emotionally when they leave those roles?
High structure is it's probably a really good terminology for it. High structure. So not necessarily like high position or on a higher big hierarchy, but not having that structure anymore. Yeah. I mean, gosh, no matter how much you prepare for it, it feels like the rug gets pulled out from you in some ways.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think like what they're not prepared for is reality, because they probably have all of these expectations. And depending on who they are as a person, they have either fears or excitements about those expectations. And neither one of them is reality. Like that's all just stories that we write in our head. And so I think like that's really what it is we have all of these attachments to potential things that are going to happen, instead of being present with ourselves and realizing like, okay, like if I don't have this structure anymore, I am responsible for a new one now. And that starts
Yeah.
inside. It starts inside of us, and not it's not given to us anymore. Military members are not they're not the only ones that, oh man, I think something's going on with this internet here. We talked about transition earlier, and I think like, you know, military members are not the only people that go through transitions. And so something that helps when people are transitioning out of one job into another one, out of the military into civilian world, whatever, it helps when you have like a network to kind of plug into, or a community to plug into. And so, you know, identifying that for yourself is really, I think, very helpful. You know, and I really think like in the future here, we're probably going to see the need for that even more, you know, in the civilian world, in the civilian landscape, because, you know, you've got a lot of people are kind of losing their jobs. And if we're forecasting this correctly, you know, there's going to be a lot of changing in the economy, and what that looks like, I don't know, but there will definitely be some friction as we figure out what the implications of AI is for different companies and for people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, these transitions are going to become more common, and not just a veteran specific thing. So I think it's really important, and I think there's a lot that people can learn from veteran stories if they haven't been paying attention yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think a big part in rebuilding that identity is creation and expression, learning to express the parts of you that are truly you, and kind of letting go of what is no longer like in alignment with who you truly are in this moment. What have you learned about leadership and authenticity now that you have been working with people outside of the military through ghostwriting and your own coaching?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, so much. Like I learn something every single day from clients, right? But it's like being human is not specific to veterans or specific to non-veterans, you know? And I think even outside of the military, many people like the idea of structure. And so sometimes they just have a hard time clarifying what that looks like for them. And so I really think that like getting people to kind of like just slow down, like just lighten everything up for a second. Like no matter how heavy everything feels in your life, like all of that's happening out there. You know, it could be cancer, it can be a death of a loved one, it can be something so traumatic, all of that. But like centering and getting present with yourself and saying like, okay, what do I need right now in this moment, right now? And that's something that people don't do. And it's so powerful to anchor yourself to the present moment and say, what do I need actually right now? I need a coffee and a blanket and a book, and that's it. Or what do I need right now? I need to express myself to someone that I know. Whatever that question is answering that question, like, what do I need right now at this moment?
So taking it back to creation as well, how did that creative practice of writing help you to reconstruct your own identity in a healthier way?
That's so cool too, right? Like, I totally didn't even talk about that when you asked about creation. That's so important, right? Like being able to create, like I look at what I do now as an entrepreneur, and I get to create every single day. I write every single day, sometimes for fun, sometimes for business, but all of it is creating something, right? And even if you look around, it's like everything in here was created first from thoughts, everything in the world. And it's so powerful when you recognize like the actual potential of the human mind to create things. And so, you know, I think creative, like if you don't have a creative outlet, like, oh, your soul is just begging for one, you know, it's just so important. But yeah, I think it's super fun to explore that with people, because everybody has that thing that they want to try, that thing that they want to get back to. everybody has it, but I don't have time, and we avoid it. And for whatever reason, all of it's fine and valid. But it's like, if you can find that one thing, to just like put everything else aside, because when you're creating, everything else disappears and all the problems, or maybe you are able to channel that into what you're creating. And that's really powerful too. I did a lot of that with my own writing. Like I started writing fiction. And it's funny, I kind of started writing fiction because I read A Song of Ice and Fire and the Game of Thrones books. I got 4 in, and I was like, I don't really like this that much. And I was like, I could write a book, and I started writing.
Yeah. Wow.
That's how I discovered it. And I was just like, this is so awesome. And now, I mean, I couldn't imagine my life without writing. I write every single day. I write my newsletters. I write fiction still. I write nonfiction. But yeah, it's having that outlet is just, it's just massive for me.
That's so cool. You made me think about journaling and, well, just like writing in general as a form of creation and expression. And I know for me, like I grew up in a very like abusive situation, like a lot of neglect, and like I spent a lot of time by myself, and I didn't really have a space to express my true self that felt safe, other than I think writing. And so like I just naturally was drawn to that, like writing in my journal, every day from as long as I can remember. But I think that shows like as kids we have these natural tendencies and ways that we gravitate to expressing ourselves, and as we grow up and get quote unquote busy and have so many different things competing for our attention, then we just kind of lose that. And so if you are somebody who you feel like your soul is begging for that outlet of creation and expression, you're like, I don't even know where to start. Go back to when you were little and just notice, what did I naturally just love to do, and try to or work on implementing that a little bit every day.
Yeah, and it's just like not being afraid to fail and make mistakes, like that. I think that's what stops people from doing it. I mean, so I played piano forever when I was a kid, and then I stopped playing when I was in the military, basically. And I was telling myself this story for the longest time, very recently, like, if I get back into playing the piano, then I'm gonna suck. And then since then, I've just kind of been like, so what? Yeah, I played piano all the, when I was a kid for 15 years, and then I stopped playing. And so then I told myself all these stories about starting again, and that I was going to suck, and that it wasn't going to be any good. And that prevented me from starting again. And then finally I got over it, and I was like, I don't care if I suck anymore. I had to relearn how to read music because I completely forgot. As a skill just went away. And now I'm playing piano again. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I should have just started this earlier, but we convince ourselves that we can't start things because we're going to be bad at them. But like, of course, but in order to get good at something, you have to be willing to be bad at it long enough to get good at it. And it's like, okay, if we can just accept that, like mistakes are built into the process. So it's okay. It's okay to try new things. And if you don't like it, it's okay to stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and detaching our worth from that process as well. I think there's a subconscious belief like, oh, if I fail at this, or if I make a mistake, then I'm a bad person, or like I'm not worthy of this, or I don't deserve that. Yeah, just means that you just made a mistake, and that you don't have that experience. But yeah, so along the lines of the inner child, I want to ask you, what would your 10-year-old self say to you today, and what would you say to him?
Oh man. Okay. I know my 10-year-old self, this is cool that I can answer this question, because my 10-year-old self would look at me today and be like, whoa, like that's so cool. like you did all that. Like I think my 10-year-old self would be really proud of me today. Ask me that, 7 years ago. I mean, I don't, but no, my 10-year-old self would be really proud. And if I could take that kid, and just give him a freaking hug, give him a big hug, and and just say like, you can give yourself a hug anytime you need to, and that like, like you are always going to be there for you, buddy. And it's such a powerful thing that I've learned. It took me until I was 35 basically to learn it, but I was always looking for someone else to give me love because I wasn't getting it the way I wanted it, and the way that I needed it. And so it was a very lonely, long road to get to the point where it's like, oh, I have to provide that for myself. And so, yeah, I think I would give that kid a big old hug and tell him that everything's going to be okay.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. How would you finish this sentence? True healing requires ...
Patience. Yeah, patience. I think that's probably
Yeah,
it.
that's good.
Yeah. And
For,
also, I am not the expert on true healings.
hey, I know, yeah. Well, speaking from a space of the healing that you've done for yourself, so, and I can tell that you have done a lot of the deep work and gone in and done that work to understand more about like why you've operated the way you have and like seeking that understanding. I think that understanding breeds empathy, and like that's so important in the healing process too.
Yeah, for sure. And there's if there's two things that have like always been there for me that I would really I try to encourage people to find always, is just gratitude and curiosity. And those are the things that are always there. If you can't be grateful, you can be curious about something, and most of the time you can find gratitude in the little things.
Yeah. And for anybody who may be quietly struggling right now, what would you want them to know?
Oh man, that your struggles do not make you weak at all. You are not different. You are not abnormal. What you're going through has been gone through by many, many people before you, and you are special, and that you should stay around. You should definitely stick around. There are so many people out there that can help you. You just got to keep on searching until you find the right one for you.
Perfect. And where can everybody go to connect with you further?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at _Rich Mulder, and you could just always check out my website at apricuscoaching.com.
Awesome. And I'll put that in the show notes for everybody. I just want to say thank you so much, Rich. I can tell you're a very grounded, like intellectual being who has done a lot of work and really cares about the people in his life as well. So I want you to give yourself a pat on the back for just how far you've come and all the work that you've done in your life, because you definitely deserve that. And yeah, I hope that you just continue to shine and sharing your knowledge with people. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Jess. I really appreciate it. This is a great conversation.
Yeah, you're so welcome. All right. Thank you everybody for listening. I hope that you were able to write down some thoughts that resonated with you. Please share with somebody who came to mind who you think could benefit from listening to this conversation. And Rich, thank you again for your service and for just everything you've done for other people and also for yourself. And we will see you on the next episode.